A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran.
Early on the morning of February 28th, news broke that the United States and Israel had attacked Iran. It began an unexpected upheaval of the region's balance of power. It's chilling to wake up, look at your phone, and read these words: the United States is at war. It's the kind of headline that feels distant until suddenly it isn't. So, to help us understand this moment and where it might lead, I'm joined by my colleague David Ignatius. He's covered US intelligence and foreign policy for decades, and he's been watching this escalation closely. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So I'm just going to start by asking, what was your initial reaction to the news of U.S. and Israeli forces launching Operation Epic Fury against the regime in Iran?
My initial reaction was surprise because I thought that the last meeting in Geneva between Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and the Iranian Foreign Minister Aragchi had narrowed the gap, and I was actually told by someone close to the negotiations right after the session ended what the positions were and what it sounded like they were getting closer to a deal that would meet Trump's conditions. So I was surprised that they went. I had thought the lean was probably the other way.
You wrote in your column, for more than 45 years, U.S. presidents have wanted to destroy the radical anti-American regime in Tehran. They always concluded that the risks of war were too great until President Trump's all-out attack with Israel. So why do you think the Trump administration made that calculation? What was their objective? What are they thinking here?
So Secretary of State Rubio said, I think importantly, revealingly, that the reason that they went was that the imminent threat that triggered the attack was their knowledge that Israel was about to attack. And they felt that if Israel attacked, the Iranians would, in retaliation, hit U.S. bases and personnel in the region. And so, knowing that Israel was going to move, they decided the U.S. should go ahead preemptively and attack as well. That's their account. I'm surprised because it sounds like Israel was the primary mover. I think their objectives as they moved into the operation were pretty much what they've said. They wanted to continue degrading the Iranian nuclear program. They do have a bit of a problem that President Trump said after the June attacks that he had obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. And so people keep saying, well, wait a minute, if it's obliterated, why do you have to attack it again? But I'm sure there are ancillary facilities. I think the more important targets were first the missile program, which is a menace. It's not going to be a menace anytime soon to the United States, contrary to what President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have said. That's some ways off, but it is a menace to Israel, to Europe, and someday would threaten the United States. And then more generally, I think their goal has been to take this Iranian regime down and destroy its ability to create mischief, beyond mischief, havoc in the region. That's been a problem for the United States, as I wrote, for more than 45 years. I'm not somebody who has any sympathy for this regime for all sorts of reasons. So I think that's a worthy objective, whether it's worth the going to war and whether the United States has the staying power for what we've embarked on, I think are much harder questions.
I want to get into the geostrategic and regional implications in a minute, but before that, I'd actually like to ask, America is in its first drone war. And I want to know, first of all, what has the world learned about drone war from Ukraine? How has it changed the strategic and tactical calculations in the ways that earlier technological innovations like the tank and air power changed warfare? But second, has the Pentagon internalized those lessons? How are we doing?
So I think we're doing pretty well. In my mind, drones, autonomous weapons, which we've seen become dominant in the Ukraine battle space, are twinned with electronic warfare that seeks to disable drones. And a real frontier of warfare is manipulation of the electronic space so as to jam the signals that drones need to steer a course, to know where they are, to communicate with their base, etc. The jamming problem has been so severe in Ukraine that, as your listeners may know, both sides now use fiber optic cables, literally cables from the ground that stretch several kilometers as the drone moves towards its target, because those cables can carry the signals that could otherwise be jammed. So the U.S. has significantly advanced its capabilities in electronic warfare and mastery of the electronic space. I wrote recently about a weapon that President Trump called the discombobulator. If you remember the attack on the Maduro compound of President Maduro in Venezuela, they knew that the U.S. was coming, but the guards were disabled by weapons that they had trouble describing. They felt a screech in their ears, and they were disoriented, and they were rendered basically incapable of defending themselves. What was that? Well, it was the discombobulator. It was an effort to manipulate the electronic space. The U.S. was able to turn out the lights in Caracas as our force moved in. Extraordinary. Again, they knew that the U.S. was coming, but a kind of rolling blackout happened across the city of Caracas. Those are all really new and powerful weapons. And so when you ask, what has the U.S. learned from Ukraine, they've learned something about drones, although I think in drone warfare, we're probably behind the curve. But in other aspects of electronic warfare that match drones, we are masterful in the area of directed energy weapons, lasers, high-powered microwaves. That's the frontier of warfare from what I know, and we're pretty darn powerful.
So you say we're behind, it looks like, in drone warfare. And another thing that people are talking about that certainly worries me, but has been on the agenda for quite a while, is this fear that the United States no longer has the supplies that they need in order to sustain operations of this tempo. So what about the reports that the US is running out of munitions?
So I'm concerned about that. The supplying Ukraine, where there's been just enormous expenditure of 155 artillery ammunition, now drones, HIMARS, medium-range missiles, et cetera, has been difficult. Even before President Trump, for political reasons, decided he didn't really want to supply Ukraine, but he would sell the material to Europe. The Iranians in this war, from what I know, from reports I'm getting from countries in the Gulf that are monitoring this very carefully, are expending their missiles and drones at least as fast as the U.S. is using.
Do you think that we actually have the capacity to sustain what we're doing right now for 4 or 5 weeks? Or are we so strained with with previous operations in Iran, with Ukraine, that our stockpiles can't really support that?
There's no question that both sides are shooting so many missiles, drones, interceptors, that they're rapidly depleting their ammunition stocks. From what I hear from contacts in the Gulf that are carefully monitoring what the Iranians are firing, the Iranians are probably depleting their stocks more quickly than the U.S. is. So although we'll run out, they probably will run out sooner. President Trump said that the U.S. is prepared to fight 4 or 5 weeks or even longer. And I'm sure that Trump usually reflects what he's just been briefed. So I am assuming that's a military account. More generally, Megan, there is a problem with the defense industrial base in the U.S. it has simply not been able to keep up with the demand for ammunition through the Ukraine war. I mean, one thought I've had, as you may, is suppose we were in a real war with China. If we're worried about running out of ammunition fighting little Iran relative to China, how long would we last in a big war with the PRC? But for the moment, I don't think that depletion of stocks is likely to be a determining factor for the U.S.
That question about China worries me too a lot, as it worries many people. And one thing I wonder about, if you had to diagnose the source of that problem, would you say it's a strategic thinking problem, a political spending problem, or is it a manufacturing capacity problem?
Some of all of the above. Famously, for people who study how the Pentagon works, we spend too much on weapon systems that we don't need in actual combat, and too little on what we do. And we're famously bad at maintenance and readiness, in part, which means procurement of the stocks, the inventories of ammunition.
Let's zoom out a little bit and think about the regional and the geopolitical effects. What message does this send to other foreign adversaries of the Trump administration, especially China? Is this more likely to strengthen our deterrence over Taiwan by signaling, hey, we're willing to escalate? Or does it weaken our power by tying us down elsewhere and demonstrating how weak our procurement is?
So I think unquestionably it strengthens deterrence. I think anytime you show you're really ready to go to war, even with all the risks, that makes adversaries think twice. I think one problem, although many aspects of President Biden's foreign policy I think were good, I think he ended up, we were self-deterred in the Ukraine conflict. We could have done more to help Ukraine. I understand all the reasons why we didn't. The president's main job is to avoid nuclear war, and Biden was concerned about Russian threats to use tactical nuclear weapons, which are real. But I think Trump, by his very unpredictability, the kind of brash bluster that we all know, has done a lot to restore deterrence.
I need to go to a break, but we'll be right back to talk more about this. Listeners, I have a confession to make. I grind my teeth in my sleep. It's not my fault. Both my parents were teeth grinders too. Bruxism, which is the scientific name for that, can cause all sorts of problems. It's not just wearing away the enamel on your teeth, but it can affect your face and jaw muscles, and it can disturb your sleep. That's why this year, I'm making sure I'm using my night guard every night. Protecting your smile while you sleep is just as important as anything you do during the day. And taking care of your health also means taking care of your teeth at night. That's where Remy comes in. If you're part of the 30% of Americans who grind your teeth, then your smile needs protection too. Make this year your year by grabbing your own night guard from Remy. You'll get the same professional quality and comfort as a night guard from the dentist, but Remy costs you 80% less, and it's way more convenient than having to go to a dentist office. So here's how it works. You receive your impression kit delivered straight to your door. You follow Remy's step-by-step instructions to get your perfect impression. Remy then crafts and ships your custom-fit night guard, and once you receive it, you can start protecting your teeth right away. It's a game changer. So start the new year right. Use code OPTIMISTIC to get 50% off your purchase of a new night guard. That's 50% off at shopremi.com/optimistic with code OPTIMISTIC. Thank you, Remy, for sponsoring this episode. Welcome back. I'm Megan McArdle, and this is Reasonably Optimistic, and I'm talking to David Ignatius. We've got about 20% of the world's oil consumption running through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's now closed it. How is this going to affect the price of oil, and what are going to be the downstream effects on the American economy, even on our military readiness, right? A lot of our ships and planes run on oil.
So this is a world that has an awful lot of oil production, and I think other non-Gulf oil can become available. But the price of oil is going to spike. The inflationary effects will be significant, and it's going to take, that's why this is going to be a big war. It's going to take significant military force to reopen and keep open the Strait of Hormuz. Whether the administration fully thought through the consequences of this. I just can't be sure. They certainly had a lot of military power in place, and President Trump says they were prepared from the beginning for a war of 4 to 5 weeks. But when you think about that specific problem, and there are lots of others we could identify, it's going to take a lot of time and military power and probably lives to reopen the strait for good.
And I think we're also seeing a regional war now. There's incredible escalation by Iran in ways that seem quite stupid to me. Can you talk about what you think Iran's thinking was, whether you think the administration anticipated that this might happen, and what the Middle East looks like when the dust settles?
The United States is not the only country to miscalculate in war. And I think the Iranians did. I think their miscalculation probably was fed by statements from the Gulf countries that indicated they didn't want to see war, that they wanted to see a settlement. Qatari mediators were shuttling back and forth to Tehran, always looking for the sweet spot where a deal could be made. Oman had designated itself as the mediator in chief, but I think the Iranians probably thought that the Gulf countries could be quickly intimidated, that they have spoken publicly and privately now for some years about not wanting to be in the firing line if a big war with Iran happened. Then the Iranians made the same mistake, arguably, that the U.S. is now making. One thing that I have learned in covering conflicts for now many decades is the lesson that was learned, you would have thought, in World War II. Bombing people doesn't usually make them ready to make a deal. It in fact tends to toughen their resolve. They get angry. So if you're an Emirati and you see hotels ablaze and it's hard to travel and your airport's closed, you might be a little mad at the United States, but you're really mad at Iran. And you dig in and you say, the hell with it. We're going to fight these guys. Again, how did the Palestinians in Gaza, month after month, put up with the degree of suffering they did? It's because people are stubborn. When you bomb them, they don't capitulate. They get angry. They dig in. People who only have their pride left, value it to an extraordinary extent.
Well, thinking about that effect on Iran, right, the hope was that you would bomb the leadership and that the Iranian people would rise up. They would put someone better in place. But of course, bombing them is going to, in some ways, create a rally around the flag effect for the regime. Counterweighted by the fact that I've now seen reports that we took out their assembly of experts, which was supposed to, or that Israel took out their assembly of experts, which was supposed to nominate the next Ayatollah. And so, what is the balance of those two forces? You've got, it seems like possibly a split within Iran between the army and the Revolutionary Guard. You've got successive waves of assassinations of leadership. You've got a populace that seems ready to rise up, but you have also got a populace that is being bombed by the United States and Israel, and is presumably going to rally some sort of support for the people who, even if you think they're the people who got them into this mess.
This war has a long way to go. I think the U.S. and Israel will, to the extent possible, degrade the security forces in Iran, the Basij militia that acts with the Revolutionary Guard to suppress ordinary folks. I'm sure they are hoping that the Iranian regular military, which traditionally has been less fanatical, less religious driven, will split, and that there will be a possibility of a military group that might come to the fore with whom you could negotiate. Typically, when you talk about regime change, you begin with the idea of fragmentation of the elites around the regime, and then you think, who could we talk to? Who can we pick off? How do we deepen the divisions that we see? There's been less of that so far than I would have thought. In part, it's because, as Trump said the other day, they killed so many people. The people you might have thought you were going to negotiate with, or some of them are dead now, to listen to Trump. Um, my fear is that the United States is going to do again what I've seen us do decade after decade, which is encourage people to risk their lives fighting for freedom, fighting for a new country. And then when the going gets tough or we get tired and we've spent our last interceptor and missile, we decide that's it. And we pack up and go home. And we leave them in a situation that, if anything, is worse than what they had before. I watched that in Lebanon as a young correspondent in the early 1980s. I watched it throughout the Arab world during the Arab Spring. Certainly watched it in Libya. I watched it in Syria. It's the recurring story. We're kind of like the cad in the Trollope novel who, seduces the fair maiden, and then when things get tough, the cad disappears. I mean, I hate to be flip about this, but the United States tends to love them and leave them. And now that we're
And then when we don't, we get bogged down in the Iraq quagmire.
exactly,
Again,
it's a quagmire. We just don't get the balance right. Um, now that we're in this, I think it's important to keep faith with the people that we've asked to take risks to build a new country. That doesn't mean sending in a ground force for occupation as in Iraq. That was crazy. It doesn't mean the sort of nation building that I saw over and over again, agonizingly misconceived in Afghanistan. But it does mean, being sensible about how this ends. Answering your question, okay, what's left after this? What kind of Iran and Middle East emerges from this big war? Big war. It's going to be very costly on all sides. And taking that seriously and having ownership of that as a country. I mean, if President Trump thinks so much about his legacy, okay, great. Think about the legacy that will matter here isn't that you sent in waves of bombers. It's that at the end of this story, this hideous process we've lived with for 47 years is over and something different and better, not just different and better is in place. And, I've, as a journalist, I'm going to try to monitor that and write about it and encourage people to take it seriously because that's the heart of the matter.
if you were advising the president, what would be the 3 things you would advise him to do to try to create that better outcome?
So select targets wisely. I think going after the people who kill those 30,000 brave Iranians in January who came out in the streets, reverse the balance of intimidation so that the people who were the killers are afraid and are running for their lives. That's one. I think 2, enfranchising people who can help build a new Iran, business people, young intellectuals. Iran has all sorts of civil society, labor unions, women's groups, lots of pieces to work with. You need to get people on the ground, and it's hard to do that if you're going to keep at a distance. But I think much more creative work needs to be done on that. I'm struck. I've been writing about intelligence for much of my career. I'm struck by how little attention has been given to the very subtle, difficult effort to make contact with the Iranians who make a new Iran. Israel can't do that. That's not going to work. I'm sorry. Splitting off ethnic groups, trying to get the Baluchis to do, free Baluchistan and the Arabic-speaking people in Khuzestan, the Kurds. That's not the way. You need to have, building one Iran, right? Iranians do have a sense of nationalism, but people who understand this, who know something about it, I could list for you 10 people I'd hire right now to form a task force to think about how to build a new, better Iran. And my worry is that this administration sometimes is so isolated, it won't reach out to those people.
Well, I hope the president will reach out and get that list from you. Uh, I'm going to ask our closing question because I know your time is limited. This is the question we ask everyone who comes on the show. What are you optimistic about?
As I said earlier in our conversation, Iran has been a menace in the Middle East for 47 years, pretty much since the revolution. It's destabilized the region. It triggered a response of al-Qaeda and Islamic fundamentalism in the Sunni countries. And for that regime to be in the process of, I want to believe, disappearing, but certainly the symbolic leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, gone, makes me optimistic that a better Iran, more faithful to its wonderful people, is coming, and that terrible, divisive pressure in the Middle East is going to be tempered. I don't want to say ending, but will be tempered.
I have to say, when I saw that video of the fighter pilot who was shot down in Kuwait and who ejected safely and approached, and she must have hit the ground at something like 15 miles an hour. So I saw someone said on Twitter, and she was just standing up and
It was cool.
looked optimistic and ready to go and cheerful. And that gave me hope for lots of things, including America. David, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Megan.